Talk about time, this building is 30 years old, so I'm feeling very old today. It was designed by Murray Leary Architects in collaboration with Tim Cooper in Trinity College Dublin, and also Owen Lewis, who was in the Energy Research Group in UCD. So cast your mind back to 30 years ago, and Temple Bar was being rebuilt. And of course, the reason is, why did we do it? Even back then, we were looking at global warming, surprisingly, but also the amount of energy that buildings take to build, and also the amount of energy that the buildings use during their use. The building started out actually as an office block in the Docklands. So on the left there is your classic architect's red and blue arrows that we all used to do, that we didn't really know what they were doing, but they look good on the drawings. And a few photo montages by myself. Photoshop wasn't existed back in then. It was spray mount and photocopiers. So basically the EU were promoting energy efficiency in test cases all around Europe that would lead, obviously, into EU standards and, as we see now, into Part L in our building regulations. It eventually found a developer, Temple Bar Properties, but it changed from an office to a mixed-use building, a city centre one. So you'll see there the building section itself comprising of retail on the basement and ground floor, which are open to the atrium, offices on the first floor, and residential on the top 3 floors. There's a central atrium with an open roof, a mechanical heat recovery ventilation unit, as we all know, the MRHV, at the top, and all the tech, as we'll explain, is mostly on the roof with a heat pump bore into the earth. I'll go back on that later. The building was modelled by ESP on Strathclyde University in Bolton Street. There were no Zoom meetings back in those days, so we had to haul it over to see the results. The plan form, it's a narrow street, 2 narrow streets, Temple Lane South and Crow Street down the road from us. And it's centred again by the atrium. It's 26 metres long by 11, so it's a tight site. The atrium is classified as an open space because the roof opens up. 2 means of escape, and with central lift in the centre. The void, or the atrium in the middle, is curved that way to follow the sun path. South is down the map. There's 8 apartments, which are tiny by today's standards. Now, we were up against the likes of Zoe Developments back in those days, and I think this is way before, obviously, space standards came in DCC. But I think the brief to us then was that they couldn't be seen to be exclusive. So the form. As you can see on the outside, we tried to use as much of bay windows and balconies in order to get as much light into the building. And the atrium there in the centre is full of regenerating, oxygenating plants. I would say at the time it was probably more hippie than hipster through its use. But as I said, it was a test case. Atrium there is at the centre with, you'll see that sock there, which is actually the mechanical heat recovery ventilation unit. And the sailcloth there was used by the artist Vivian Roach to oxygenate the area. As I said, the bottom, the basement, ground and basement were retail. And because it's open to it, we were concerned about noise. So there was, at one time, a water feature there to minimise noise and use white noise instead. The apartments, as I said, are small, but we were looking also at recycled material. So you'll see brick. All the kitchens had to have windows, which is pretty unique back in those days. And because they're so small, there's one of the apartments, or 4 of the apartments, have these bay windows that turn into balconies. They're from a French company, and they leaked like mad. I spent 3 years snagging this building, so we never used them again. Part of the brief, obviously, was recycling, and even though this wasn't a public building, we were keen to put as much art into the building, so it's integrated into it rather than applied. You'll see the first slide on the left is a door by Maud Cotter, and I think it's called Mellifluous Jellies. and it's made from recycled material found on the floor of the Cork Sculpture Factory, sandwiched between two buildings, or two panes of glass. There was a nod to recycling, literally, with recycled bicycles on the balconies, which rusted like hell. And you'll see on the right-hand side a Remco de Foo copper entrance door. In fact, that was taken at the launch of the building when people were actually queuing up to buy the building. So nothing really has changed in 30 years. The tech. Most of the tech is actually on the roof. And again, this was probably the first time I think wind generators were actually used on the building. These were imported from Oklahoma, and they were about 1.5 kilowatts each. They were decommissioned because they didn't work. That lovely thing that we learned in college called harmonic resonance started. So the building will actually shake when these three windmills started going. They also got disturbed because they didn't know which way it was. They're in the city centre, so there wasn't actually a good path of air to go across them. So they weren't decommissioned. But look, it's a test case. They don't work. Don't use them again. The PV, on the other hand, I think it was one of the first buildings in Ireland to use photovoltaics. It was very extreme in that. They generate about 3,000 kilowatt hours per year and are still going. They've only failed once or twice, and it's just through a storm. Solar thermal, you'll see on the second slide there, is the evacuated tubes, which are kind of old hat now, but they provide the free water. Now, this is a heat pump. Don't get excited about it, but this is what you can see. So this is actually a heat pump which has a heat bore down 150 meters into the Earth's surface. Just for comparison's sake, the spire is 120 meters. So that apparently is very efficient. The efficiency ratio is about 4.5 to 5, which means for every kilowatt you put into it, you get 4.5 or 5 kilowatts back in heat. In terms of monitoring and usage, all the apartments are monitored and continue to be monitored for heat, which led to some concern from some occupants finding out that there was heat spikes late at night in their bedrooms. So we could find out exactly what people were doing. It uses 80% of energy, 80% less energy than a normal building at the time. I think about 15 years after the PV was put in, it used to go down into batteries in the basement, which apparently were lead acid. Could you believe that? Because I don't think lithium was invented back in those days. They were coming to their end of the life, so it was the first building to be switched back into a grid system, and it now actually gains €300 per year. So energy and heating apparently are nearly free for the usage. I suppose one of the shocking things that's come out of it is what's happening underneath the building. So from 1993 to 2001, Tim Cooper has been taking readings, and you can see over the lifetime, the bedrock temperature has increased by 2.5 degrees, which is kind of shocking up the road. So there is a small clip here. My thanks to Niall Martin in RTE and Nationwide. I've clipped it to 50 seconds for copyright reasons, and you might recognize somebody in the middle of it.
All the bedrooms open onto this quiet, bright and airy atrium at the heart of the building. The air here is oxygenated and humidified by these carefully chosen plants. In summer, warm air is released through a glass roof that opens automatically. In winter, the roof closes to keep in the heat, and rising warm air is blown through a sock back down to ground level for recirculation.
So therefore, we looked at minimising the amount of steel in the building, minimising the amount of energy inefficient material that we could. Most of the finishes you see here are natural finishes. We tried to go away from solvent-based paints. We
monitored in the high-tech basement by the project managers from Dublin's Trinity College.
And on the screen now we're getting real-time temperatures from the well where we're extracting bedrock energy, using the heat pump and transferring it into the building.
So would the average resident in this building save on their energy bills every year, percentage-wise?
We would expect them to save of the order of 80% compared to a conventional electrically heated apartment.